We have a response from Geoff Wilson, aka the sports card investor, regarding this 1984 star Michael Jordan rookie card. It's an absurd story, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I was really confused before I asked these questions. I'm probably even more confused now that I have these answers, and I sort of owe you guys a bit of an explanation, as I said in the last video, because this is something that needs to be dug into, and I think the ramifications of what is going on here is quite worrying, in my opinion. So I want to share my thoughts, as always, and then get your opinions down in the comments below. Now, this sort of all kickstarted in the last week or so, where Geoff came out and flexed that he made a $144,000 profit, and he talked about in this video that he often gets people hating on him and making fun of him for making the whole Will Greer type investments, etc. But this is one where he's made big, basically flexing. So obviously, if somebody wants to do that, good on you. You take the good with the bad, etc. But what sort of happened since then was, a bit strange, pretty funny, pretty stupid, in my opinion. So he's coming out and flexing that he made a $144,000 card profit, and that he's sure glad that he bought this card. But when you sort of sit here and watch the video, you find out that he's not actually talking about, a card that he sold, being the card that he bought for $100,000 in 2022. It was actually a completely different style Jordan in the same grade, PSA 8, that had sold on Golden. And the likes of Sports Card Radio, etc., had made fun of him because obviously flexing an unrealized gain is going to be the silliest thing you can possibly do, right? You can obviously, pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I made a really good investment with this card, but the way it was sort of transpired here was like he had made that profit already. Obviously, you don't make a profit until you sell. Now, where things got a little bit interesting was this reel over here that he posted a couple of days later. He sort of talked about which cards he should sell, and this raised two questions in particular. Firstly, the person in this comment over here says, based on your video from a few days ago, I thought you sold your PSA 8 on Golden. Guess you still have it, being the one he's holding in his hand. What Geoff then responded was, I think I confused some people. I didn't sell mine. I was happy about the sale of another copy in the same grade, i.e., him doing exactly what I just said, flexing an unrealized gain. Pretty laughable, in my opinion, pretty silly, and probably another case of him, having egg on his face, because it's not so much him saying, look, I've done really good with this. It's the shenanigans around it, the big hoo-ha around it that, again, just looks a little bit silly. I could be wrong when I say that, but you guys will probably agree with me. Now, where this got even more interesting is the card in his hand is actually not the same one that he bought at the 2022 National. I believe it was at the National. It's actually a different copy, completely different copy, different cert number. And the one he actually bought in 2022 is now currently sitting in the set registry of the person he bought it from. So this is obviously making the story even more insane, because he's now apparently flexing a profit of $144,000, like you guys saw over there, $144,000 card profit on a card that he's since sold. So he's not even flexing the right amount, because clearly he would have bought this one for a different price, or you would assume so, considering he apparently bought it recently. Now, the guys from Sports Card Radio talked about this on their recent live stream. They went into the detail of the fact that Geoff bought this card at that 2022 National, if I remember correctly, maybe 2023, paid $100,000 for it, but it was now sitting in the registry of someone else. And what sort of people discovered, as I just mentioned, through all those reels that Geoff made, it was actually back in the registry of the person he bought it from. And the card that Geoff referenced over here is a completely different one, which is the one you're sort of seeing on screen right now. So this obviously created a heck of a lot of confusion to a story that was already confusing, right? To recap, a minute ago, Geoff basically flexing a profit on a card that he didn't actually make. He didn't sell his card for that amount of money, so he's sort of flexing it. Then to make it even more confusing, the card that he's sort of referencing that he's flexing on is a card that he no longer owns. And he's actually sold it and then bought a different copy of the 84 star. So the comparison is also wrong, because more than likely the amount of money that he paid for this new one is different to the amount of money that he paid for the original one. And I'll get to why I think that's the case in a second, but you can understand why this whole story is just absolutely ridiculous, and why the guy, in my opinion, has sort of done himself no favors here. He continues to do himself no favors, and he's clearly, got egg on his face. Now, like I just mentioned, because he sold a copy and now bought a different one, that's what I wanted to try and understand from his team. And I sort of asked him a few questions to try and understand what the heck happened. And I'm going to talk you through those now, because I think you guys have a right to know, because there is a lot of confusion with this. Now, I basically reached out to his team initially, one of his contacts, to get some insight. They responded, but I wanted a bit more information, so I went to Geoff directly. He actually responded, which was, I guess, good for the point of this video, but I just wanted to give you guys that context. Now, I reached out to Geoff and said, I spoke to, Kelly for your team about some questions. And then I replied about an hour later and said, It would be great to understand a more detailed timeline, including what you paid/sold the cards for. A bit of confusion at the moment, so I want to make sure the facts are out there. You guys know that I like to create an unbiased and balanced opinion of things. I want to know what the heck is going on because clearly the way Geoff is presenting it in his reels is not true and fair and is not accurate, and could be argued as pumping and dumping by some people within this hobby. Now, Geoff responded and said he bought a nicer PSA 8. I'll get to that because I don't think it's nicer, earlier this year, and sold the one he bought in 2022 for the same price he bought the new copy for. I then replied and said, okay, thank you. Will you disclose what you sold the copy for? Because I think it's important to this story. When he's sitting there saying he's made a $144,000 profit, the price he's bought the new copy for is very relevant to that conversation, right? Because if he had paid a lower price, the profit would be even bigger. That'd be something that you'd expect him to be showing off. He said no, because it was a private sale and the guy who bought it asked me not to disclose. But I sold it for exactly the same amount of money I bought the better copy for. Now, like I sort of said a little bit earlier, my understanding based on the videos AOH Sports has done and also Sports Card Radio, the person who we sold the copy to is the one who he originally bought it from. So the fact the price is not being disclosed makes me think, putting the tinfoil hat on, that's probably sold for a lower amount. So Geoff maybe made a loss on the card because maybe they're trying to do price protection on a PSA 8. They don't want the lower price to be out there within the public. Apologies, had to cut the video very quickly there because I was coughing. My mic's in the way, that's why I'm sort of moving to the side. But I sort of said, understood, thank you for clarifying. I basically said I'm going to flag this in the next video because, I think this is an important thing to be updating. I said there's a lot of debate online. I'm sure he's seen some of the pushback people have given him. I just wanted to understand everything before going into the detail. He said he's seen some of it. Some people are obsessed with trying to bust him and make something out of nothing. He says he doesn't really care, to be honest. I don't buy that portion of the conversation, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. And that's sort of where our conversation ceased. I replied to him again 12 hours before recording this video. So it's currently Thursday night here in Australia. I messaged him Thursday morning, 6 a.m. my time, and just asked him again if he wanted to double confirm that he doesn't want to share the sale price. And I've got no reply since. Now, like I sort of mentioned, I find it very strange how he doesn't want to disclose the price. But what Geoff has essentially come out and said is that he sold this card earlier this year, earlier in 2024, and then used those funds to buy this card in the amount he sold this one for. He paid this one because he thought this one was a better copy. But, if we jump between the two cards in of itself, I'm not exactly sure that is the case, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. This copy over here, firstly, does not have the NBA sticker like the one he bought in 2022 did. So, typically the NBA stickers command higher prices. So if he sort of owned the NBA copy, sold it, and then now acquired one without it for the same amount of money, that seems a bit, counterintuitive to me and doesn't make sense, right? Typically, this copy should sell for a little bit less. And if you look at these two certs right now, it's obviously difficult for me to show on camera because the bottom of the card has been cut off and I can't, zoom in and out effectively. But even looking at the top of the card, you can sort of see there's some like whitening over here on the corners. There's some scuff marks. There's a little bit down here below on the edges. Again, this one's not perfect either, but it seems to be slightly better. So I don't buy based on these scans, right? Maybe in person, they look very, very different. Maybe the one he did now own is better. But based on these scans, this one looks like a slightly inferior card. So what does that mean? I think what's basically happened here is Geoff has sold this card for a loss. And he's obviously not disclosing that because he wants to maybe price protect the card, going into all those pumping and dumping accusations tied to this, type of 84 star Jordan that are ripe at the moment because people are making all these crazy sales, or he's made a loss on it and he's just trying to save face, right? He's trying to push back on people that are saying you're a bad investor. And this is maybe yet another case of him maybe dropping the ball or, not being as good as maybe his channel makes it out to be. Now, again, that's just my opinion, but I think it's an interesting one, right? Because I don't understand why he would not disclose the price. Because if he did, in fact, sell this for more money, you would think in this video over here, he would have been quoting a bigger profit than $144,000. He would have been saying, well, actually, I sold a card that I paid for 100 for 120, and then I went ahead and bought this one for a little bit less, so the profit is even bigger. But that's obviously not happened here. Like, I would very much expect him to have done that, right? Especially given the way he's come out and sort of flexed in this video over here and then sort of again in this one, right? He seems to be very ego-driven in that regard and very conscious of what people are saying about him. So had he made a profit on it, you'd expect him to be talking about it, right? Because like I just said, he seems very ego-driven. Now, the other point is that he's maybe sold a better copy for one amount of money and then later maybe got FOMO and bought a newer copy that's slightly inferior for the same amount of money. So that is obviously embarrassing in of itself, right? You make this call in 2022, you back yourself, and then you go ahead and sell it right as the stuff is about to peak. And not only did you sell it, but you go ahead and sell it for an amount that you go ahead and buy a more inferior copy of. Like, there's a lot to sort of unpack here. I just think it's absolutely crazy. And the fact that, like I said, he went out and sort of presented it this way, presented this intentional confusion, right? Because he could have come out initially and said in this video, well, it's not $144,000 because I actually sold my copy. Like, why did you withhold that information in the first place? Why did you think that was a good idea? Like, this doesn't this doesn't stop the fueling of the fire of conspiracy theories around, pumping and dumping, because you're misrepresenting the information over here. There's misinformation here. You knew you sold the copy, so why are you making it out like you didn't? And then again, you had the opportunity to clarify and you didn't do it over here. And now you won't disclose what you paid and sold the copies for. Like, you're just creating so much confusion that feeds into those price protection comments. It feeds into you maybe not having any idea what you're doing. You want to come out and push back on the haters, but then you go ahead and drop the ball completely. Like, you can't even dunk on people in the right way. And you guys know I'm fair and balanced on this channel. I like to keep things fair and balanced because I want facts to speak for themselves, and that's not to downplay the approach of others. Everyone has their way of doing things. I don't judge anyone. But it's like, mate, you haven't helped yourself here at all. Like, you deserve the pushback in this particular instance. And it's another example of you being completely out of touch with, the general person within this hobby, right? It started with your investment advice. It started with you selling picks. It started with you pushing the whole flipping game, you being the landing page for that kind of stuff, being a complete misrepresentation of what the core of this hobby has always been about. And whilst change is okay, the way things have sort of transpired have led to a sort of environment where hobby boxes are crazily expensive. You've got these really terrible offerings from Topps and Panini, this whole chase for these big value cards. It's very much lost its collector focus, I think, for the most part. And I think we have someone like Geoff to blame for that. And whether you think that's right or wrong, that's entirely up to you in the comments. I don't like it. But then you go ahead and see stuff like this where you're giving people clear examples to say you're pumping and dumping this card for all the reasons that I just mentioned in this video. And again, they're just my opinion. And maybe Geoff could clarify this whole situation by coming out and saying, well, actually, I sold the card for a profit, meaning that this video is made redundant. The videos from Sports Code Radio were made redundant. But like I said a little bit earlier, had that actually happened, I think we would have seen more context given. Because even if he still did not want to disclose the price, he could have come out and said, you know what, I made a profit. Maybe people wouldn't have believed him, but it's a lot better than what the heck is going on right now. Another clear example from this guy about being completely out of touch and sort of not getting it. He does not get it, and I want to hear what you guys have to say down below. So, thanks for watching. Apologies, like I said, I had to cut the video a couple of times. I've had a really bad cough, so it's just coming sporadically. So I don't normally like to cut. I like to do my stuff in one take, but it is what it is. Share your thoughts down below, and if you could give this video a like, a follow, maybe make sure even clicking the notification bell would be really helpful, because the messaging within this video in particular is something that we need to sort of get out there. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll chat to you guys in the next one. Cheers.